Hare Krishna. So we are concluding the book called Nectar of Instruction by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. This is Shravanam Diaries podcast and I'm your host, Sulavita Devidasi. So today we shall complete the book with texts number 10 and 11. Karmibhyah parito hareh priyataya Vyaktim yayurgyaninas Tebhyo jnana vimukta bhakti paramah Premaika nishtastata Tebhyastah pashupala pankajadrishas Tabhyo pisaradhika Preshta tadvadiyam tadiya sharasi Tam nishrayet kah kriti Karmibhyah, then all fruitive workers, paritah in all respects, hare by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, priyataya because of being favored, vyaktim yayuh, it is said in the Shastra, jnanina, those advanced in knowledge, tebhyah, superior to them, jnana vimukta, liberated by knowledge, bhakti parama, those engaged in devotional service, prema ekanishta, those who have attained pure love of God, tata, superior to them, tebhya, better than them, ta, they, pashupala pankajadrisha, the gopis, who are always dependent on Krishna, the coward boy, tabhya, above all of them, api, certainly, sa, she, radhika, Shrimati Radhika, preshta, very dear, tadvat, similarly, iyam, this, tadiya sarasi, her lake, Shri Radhakunda, tam, Radhakunda, na, not, ashrayet, would take shelter of, ka, who, kriti, most fortunate. Translation. In the Shastra, it is said that of all types of fruitive workers, he who is advanced in knowledge of the higher principles of life is favored by the Supreme Lord Hari. Out of many such people who are advanced in knowledge, Jnanis, one who is practically liberated by virtue of his knowledge, may take to devotional service. He is superior to the others. However, one who has actually attained prema, pure love of Krishna, is superior to him. The gopis are exalted above all the advanced devotees because they are always totally dependent upon Shri Krishna, the transcendental coward boy. Among the gopis, Shrimati Radharani is the most dear to Krishna. Her Kunda, lake, is as profoundly dear to Lord Krishna as this most beloved of the gopis. Who then will not reside at Radhakunda and in a spiritual body surcharged with ecstatic devotional feelings, aprakrita bhava, render loving service to the divine couple, Shri Shri Radha Govinda, who perform their Ashtakali Leela, their eternal eightfold daily pastimes. Indeed, those who execute devotional service on the banks of Radha Kunda are the most fortunate people in the universe. Purport. At the present moment, almost everyone is engaged in some kind of fruitive activity. Those who are desirous of gaining material profits by working are called karmis, or fruitive workers. All living entities within this material world have come under the spell of Maya. This is described in the Vishnu Purana 6.7.61. Vishnu Shakti para prokta kshetra gyakya tatha para avidya karma samgyanya tritiya Shakti Rishyate. Sages have divided the energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead into three categories, namely, the spiritual energy, the marginal energy, and the material energy. The material energy is considered to be the third-class energy, Tritiya Shakti. Those living entities within the jurisdiction of the material energy sometimes engage themselves like dogs and hogs in working very hard simply for sense gratification. However, in this life or after executing pious activities in the next life, some karmis become strongly attracted to performing various kinds of sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas. Thus, on the strength of their pious merit, they are elevated to heavenly planets. Actually, those who perform sacrifices strictly according to Vedic injunctions are elevated to the moon and planets above the moon. As mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, Kshine punye martyalokam vashanti. After exhausting the results of their so-called pious activities, they again return to the earth, which is called Martyaloka, the place of death. Although such persons may be elevated to the heavenly planets by their pious activities, and although they may enjoy life there for many thousands of years, they nonetheless must return to this planet when the results of their pious activities are exhausted. This is the position of all karmis, including those who act piously and those who act impiously. On this planet we find many businessmen, politicians, and others who are simply interested in material happiness. They attempt to earn money by all means, not considering whether such means are pious or impious. Such people are called karmis or gross materialists. Among the karmis are some vikarmis, those who act without the guidance of Vedic knowledge. Those who act on the basis of Vedic knowledge perform sacrifices for the satisfaction of Lord Vishnu and to receive benedictions from him. In this way, they are elevated to higher planetary systems. Such karmis are superior to the vikarmis, for they are faithful to the directions of the Vedas, and are certainly dear to Krishna. In Bhagavad Gita 4.11, Krishna says, Ye yathamam prapadyante tam tathaiva bhajamyaham. Quote, in whatever way one surrenders unto me, I reward him accordingly. Unquote. Krishna is so kind that he fulfills the desires of the karmis and gyanis, what to speak of the bhaktas. Although the karmis are sometimes elevated to higher planetary systems, as long as they remain attached to fruitive activities, they must accept new material bodies after death. If one acts piously, he can attain a new body among the demigods in the higher planetary systems, or he may attain some other position in which he can enjoy a higher standard of material happiness. On the other hand, those who are engaged in impious activities are degraded and take birth as animals, trees, and plants. Thus, those fruitive actors who do not care for the Vedic directions, vikarmis, are not appreciated by learned, saintly persons. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 5.5.4, Nunam pramata kurute vikarma yadindriya pritaya aprinoti. Nasadu manyeyata atmanoyam asana pikleshada asadeha. Quote, materialists who work hard like dogs and hogs simply for sense gratification are actually mad. They simply perform all kinds of abominable activities simply for sense gratification. Materialistic activities are not at all worthy of an intelligent man, for as a result of such activities, one gets a material body which is full of misery. Unquote. The purpose of human life is to get out of the threefold miserable conditions which are concomitant with material existence. Unfortunately, fruitive workers are mad to earn money and acquire temporary material comforts by all means. Therefore, they risk being degraded to lower species of life. Materialists foolishly make many plans to become happy in this material world. They do not stop to consider that they will live only for a certain number of years, out of which they must spend the major portion acquiring money for sense gratification. Ultimately, such activities end in death. Materialists do not consider that after giving up the body, they may become embodied as lower animals, plants, or trees. Thus, all their activities simply defeat the purpose of life. Not only are they born ignorant, but they act on the platform of ignorance, thinking that they are getting material benefits in the shape of skyscraper buildings, big cars, honorable positions, and so on. The materialists do not know that in the next life they will be degraded and that all their activities simply serve as parabhava, their defeat. This is the verdict of Srimad Bhagavatam 5.5.5 Parabhavas tavada bodha jata. One should therefore be eager to understand the science of the soul, Atma Tattva. Unless one comes to the platform of Atma Tattva, by which one understands that the soul and not the body is oneself, one remains on the platform of ignorance. Out of thousands and even millions of ignorant people who are wasting their time simply gratifying their senses, one may come to the platform of knowledge and understand higher values of life. Such a person is called a Jnani. The Jnani knows that fruitive activities will bind him to material existence and cause him to transmigrate from one kind of body to another. As indicated in Srimad Bhagavatam by the term Sharira Bandha, bound to bodily existence, as long as one maintains any conception of sense enjoyment, his mind will be absorbed in karma, fruitive activity, and this will oblige him to transmigrate from one body to another. Thus, a Jnani is considered superior to a karmi because he at least refrains from the blind activities of sense enjoyment. This is the verdict of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, although a Jnani may be liberated from the ignorance of the karmis, unless he comes to the platform of devotional service, he is still considered to be in ignorance, avidya. Although one may be accepted as a Jnani or one advanced in knowledge, his knowledge is considered impure because he has no information of devotional service and thus neglects the direct worship of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When a Jnani takes to devotional service, he rapidly becomes superior to an ordinary jnani. Such an advanced person is described as Jnana Vimukta Bhakti Parama. How a jnani takes to devotional service is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita 7.19, wherein Krishna says, Bahunam janmanam ante jnanavam mam prapadyante vasudeva sarvam iti samahatma sudurlabha. Quote, after many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Unquote. Actually, a person is wise when he surrenders unto the lotus feet of Krishna, but such a Mahatma, great soul, is very rare. After taking to devotional service under the regulative principles, a person may come to the platform of spontaneous love of Godhead, following in the footsteps of great devotees like Narada and Sanaka and Sanatana. The Supreme Personality of Godhead then recognizes him to be superior. The devotees who have developed love of Godhead are certainly in an exalted position. Of all these devotees, the gopis are recognized as superior because they do not know anything other than satisfying Krishna. Nor do the gopis expect any return from Krishna. Indeed, sometimes Krishna puts them into extreme suffering by separating himself from them. Nonetheless, they cannot forget Krishna. When Krishna left Vrindavan for Mathura, the gopis became most dejected and spent the rest of their lives simply crying in separation from Krishna. This means that, in one sense, they were never actually separated from Krishna. There is no difference between thinking of Krishna and associating with him. Rather, Vipralamba Seva, thinking of Krishna in separation, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did, is far better than serving Krishna directly. Thus, of all the devotees who have developed unalloyed devotional love for Krishna, the gopis are most exalted, and out of all these gopis, Srimati Radharani is the highest. No one can excel the devotional service of Srimati Radharani. Indeed, even Krishna cannot understand the attitude of Srimati Radharani. Therefore, he took her position and appeared as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, just to understand her transcendental feelings. In this way, Srila Rupa Goswami gradually concludes that Srimati Radharani is the most exalted devotee of Sri Krishna, and that her Kunda, lake Sri Radha Kunda, is the most exalted place. This is verified in a quotation from Laghu Bhagavatamrita, Uttarakhanda 45, as quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Yatha Radha Priya Vishnaus Tasyah Kundam Priyam Tatha Sarva Gopishu Saivaika Vishnu Ratyanta Vallabha. Quote, just as Srimati Radharani is dear to the Supreme Lord Krishna, Vishnu, so her bathing place, Radha Kunda, is equally dear to Krishna. Among all the gopis, she alone stands supreme as the Lord's most beloved. Unquote. Therefore, everyone interested in Krishna consciousness should ultimately take shelter of Radha Kunda and execute devotional service there throughout one's life. This is the conclusion of Rupa Goswami in this verse of Upadeshamrita. Last verse, text 11. Krishnasya chaih pranaya vasatir priya sibhyo piradha kundam chasya munibhirabhitastadrik eva vyadhyahai yat preshtairapyalam asulabam kim punarbhakti bhajam tat premidam sakridapi sarasnatur avishkaroti. Krishnasya, of Lord Shri Krishna, Uchaih, very highly, Pranaya Vasatih, object of love, Priyasibhyah, out of the many lovable gopis, Api, certainly, Radha, Srimati Radharani, Kundam, lake, Cha, also, Asyah, of her, Munibhih, by great sages, Abhitah, in all respects, Tadrik Eva, similarly, Vyadhai, is described, Yat, which, Preshtaih, by the most advanced devotees, Api, even, Alam, enough, Asulabham, difficult to obtain, Kim, what, Punah, again, Bhakti Bhajam, for persons engaged in devotional service, Tat, that, Prema, love of Godhead, Idam, this, Sakrit, once, Api, even, Sarah, lake, Snatu, of one who has bathed, Avishkaroti, arouses. Translation. Of the many objects of favored delight and of all the lovable damsels of Vrajabhumi, Srimati Radharani is certainly the most treasured object of Krishna's love. And in every respect, her divine Kunda is described by great sages as similarly dear to him. Undoubtedly, Radha Kunda is very rarely attained even by the great devotees. Therefore, it is even more difficult for ordinary devotees to attain. If one simply bathes once within those holy waters, one's pure love of Krishna is fully aroused. Purport. Why is Radha Kunda so exalted? The lake is so exalted because it belongs to Srimati Radharani, who is the most beloved object of Shri Krishna. Among all the gopis, she is the most beloved. Similarly, her lake, Shri Radhakunda, is also described by great sages as the lake that is as dear to Krishna as Radha himself. Indeed, Krishna's love for Radhakunda and Srimati Radharani is the same in all respects. Radhakunda is very rarely attained even by great personalities fully engaged in devotional service. Even by great personalities fully engaged in devotional service. Not to speak of ordinary devotees who are only engaged in the practice of Vaidhi Bhakti. It is stated that a devotee will at once develop pure love of Krishna in the wake of the gopis if he once takes a bath in Radhakunda. Srila Rupa Goswami recommends that even if one cannot live permanently on the banks of Radhakunda, he should at least take a bath in the lake as many times as possible. This is a most important item in the execution of devotional service. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes in this connection that Shri Radhakunda is the most select place for those interested in advancing their devotional service in the wake of the lady friends, Sakhis, and confidential serving maids, Manjaris of Srimati Radharani. Living entities who are eager to return home to the transcendental kingdom of God, Galoka Vrindavan, by means of attaining their spiritual bodies, Siddha Deha, should live at Radhakunda, take shelter of the confidential serving maids of Sri Radha, and under their direction engage constantly in her service. This is the most exalted method for those engaged in devotional service under the protection of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Wow, this is interesting. Serving Srimati Radharani, constantly being engaged under the protection of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In this connection, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes that even great sages and great devotees like Narada and Sanaka do not get an opportunity to come to Radhakunda to take their baths. What then to speak of ordinary devotees? If by great fortune one gets an opportunity to come to Radhakunda and bathe even once, he can develop his transcendental love for Krishna, exactly as the gopis did. It is also recommended that one should live on the banks of Radhakunda and should be absorbed in the loving service of the Lord. One should bathe there regularly and give up all material conceptions, taking shelter of Sri Radha and her assistant gopis. If one is thus constantly engaged during his lifetime, after giving up the body, he will return back to Godhead, to serve Sri Radha in the same way as he contemplated during his life on the banks of Radhakunda. The conclusion is that to live on the banks of the Radhakunda and to bathe there daily constitute the highest perfection of devotional service. It is a difficult position to attain even for great sages and devotees like Narada. Thus there is no limit to the glory of Sri Radhakunda. By serving Radhakunda, one can get an opportunity to become an assistant of Srimati Radharani under the eternal guidance of the gopis. Jai. Jai Jai Shri Radhe Shyam. Shri Radhakunda ki Jai. All glories to Shri Radhakunda. Wow, I don't think I'm qualified to say anything at this moment. Jai. This was Nectar. Let's not spoil it with my commentaries, useless commentary. So thank you so much for tuning in. I consider myself to be very fortunate to have read this book again. And whoever tuned in and listened, you are all very fortunate. And I pray and hope that by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, all of us will be able to one day become confidential, Prabhupada said, take shelter of the confidential serving maids of Sri Radha and under their direction engage constantly in her service under the protection of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Jai. So thank you so much for tuning in. The link to this book is in the description. We shall start the next book tomorrow and we shall see you next time. Hare Krishna.